Ladies and gents, I'm gonna give my thoughts on the episode Heresy, which is the most recent episode Bungie has pushed out. This is the third episode Bungie has done and will be the final episode Bungie will ever do. Now, to be quite frank, episodes really are not that much different than seasons. The biggest difference is that episodes last 4 months, whereas seasons would last 3 months, which is why you've seen some major player dip off in the past 2 episodes, which is honestly great for me because it gives me opportunities to play other games, most notably Warframe and others. But yes, just to be frank, Destiny has seen a decline pretty much episode over episode, season over season, whatever you want to call it, with day 1 peaks going down substantially. And if you start from the charts, from like Echoes day 1 to Revenant day 1 to Heresy day 1, you see that dip. What you never want to see is lower highs. And that's unfortunately the situation that Destiny and Bungie is in right now, which is a shame because Heresy is actually good. We've had our first wave of content come out for the first week. We've hit the new activity, which is the Nether Activity, which is something Bungie has never done before. We'll talk more in depth about that in just a second. And we've hit the dungeon, Sundered Doctrine, which contains a lore bomb of information. For one reason or another, when it comes to Hive content, Bungie gets it right. And like part of this is like made me sit back and wonder, could it just be the fact that maybe I'm not interested in Fallen or Vex or even the Cabal? Or maybe it's just that the Hive Pantheon itself is just so damn interesting. It could be that, but I also think it just comes down to delivery. And Bungie, when it comes to Hive content, they're able to deliver as if the story is well thought out. Now I'm gonna mention some spoilers going into this, pretty much just covering the first week of content that rolled in. So if you have not played it and you wanna completely avoid that, click away now. Let me just say the tone that is set in this episode is probably the best we've ever seen delivered in an episode, but also the best we've ever seen delivered in a season. The opening scene here where Drifter and Eris are taking on enemies, and then suddenly she's straight up murdered right there on the spot and then drug. Keep in mind, she doesn't even have a ghost, so when she dies, she dies. This is the same chick who lost her entire fire team while venturing into the Hellmouth and literally had to adopt Hive magic to stay alive, beating on their power, giving her those sexy, sexy eyes. Oh, don't kid yourself, fellas. In Jermaine's eyes, they sexy. And the voice line deliveries from both the Drifter and Eris were beautifully delivered, and you can hear the pain in his voice as well as anger following the loss of Eris. Now, this has also set up some things because neither the Guardian nor the Drifter knows that Eris in some way or another is alive. Now, we don't really know if she's alive. The scene shows her in a throne world, which we're assuming is her throne world, which should mean she is technically still alive. So let me just say, guys, right out the gate, this entire setup, from her death to the lines being delivered to her waking up in her throne world, these are huge, monumental lore jumps. Now, I will say this though, I kind of would have liked it if we didn't know Eris was alive. Like, imagine if this cutscene was something that was delivered weeks from now, and that way we could take part in like the mourning process with Drifter. So far right now, we get the lines while we're in orbit. He's obviously greatly upset and mourning, and it doesn't really feel like we get to mourn with him because we're like, yo, we just saw a cutscene just a second ago. She's good, man. I'm sure Bungie was faced with this situation, and maybe they just thought, all right, this thing's gonna get data mined, just release it now. Which in my opinion, Bungie really needs to do something about data mining. That's a topic for a whole nother video, but every single secret in Destiny seems to never be a secret ever. Another direction Bungie took is now making the hub of operations Eris's apartment, which just solidifies the loss of Eris even more. You go into this apartment, it's empty. We don't really know exactly how other Guardians live outside of maybe Zavala in his office, which is much more presentable than this. She definitely got some goth mommy vibes up in here. It's funny because there was actually a meme being shared out from Destiny, the meme of Eris's floor plan. You've got the Drifter probably lives here, the Acolyte Eyes storage, and then the large paracausal taken object of dubious origin. Yeah, dude, like, what even is this? One, where did this come from? How did it get here? And does nobody say anything? Like, there are Fallen that live in this apartment complex. Nobody was like, yo, what you got up there, huh? The fact that Drifter even comes over here and stays the night and they sleep next to this thing. What the hell? But I love that Bungie is using this as our hub of operations. It's not the boring Vanguard, which, let's just be frank, the Vanguard's been boring now for 3-4 years. It's just us inside of Eris's empty apartment. And to me, that speaks volumes, which kind of brings back the point that I wish that we hadn't seen the cutscene of Eris somehow evading death within her throne world. Yes, the lore connotations behind it is huge, but I do wonder if the impact would have been better received had we not known whether or not she lived, which would have, of course, made her empty apartment feel all the more impactful. So far, guys, that's essentially week 1. This all leads into the new activity activity, the Nether Activity, which is something Bungie has never done before. It's an activity that you could tackle as a solo player and with a fire team. Obviously, it's easier with a fire team, but the most interesting thing about this activity is that your health is a resource rather than something that you regenerate elsewhere in the game. I didn't know if I was going to like this or not, but so far it's been pretty fun because it drives me to explore the entire map. It also pushes me to get certain upgrades in this activity, to collect boons, and pay attention to the boons that I acquire. And for those not familiar with what boons are, these are essentially upgrades that you get throughout this activity and only this activity that makes you stronger. And there are various ways to acquire boons. The point is that for the longest time in Destiny, when we load up an activity, we just go forward. We kill enemies, we melt things. The object is to get through it as fast as you can. And I'm not saying that that's not the same goal here with the Nether Activity, but what it does is something that many activities in Destiny never require us to do. It makes us stop, it makes us explore, and it also potentially makes us strategize on how to approach that activity that's not always one-to-one. Everything we do in Destiny is very much one-to-one for the most part, outside of optimizing builds before you go into the activity itself. Whether it's a Grandmaster Nightfall or a dungeon, you have a preset build that you have going into it, and once you narrow that down, it's pretty much one-to-one every single time. The fact that you load into this activity in random locations with boons, whether they're major, minor, or corrupted boons being presented to you randomly, this changes up your runs and doesn't make every run feel one-to-one. Granted, could you run this almost the same every single time? Absolutely. You can go in there with the same build, run the same stuff, and potentially you could ignore boons. But I think that would make your run substantially harder. And if you're not paying attention and you grab the wrong boon, for instance, the glass cannon boon, which increases your damage, but also increases how much damage you take, good luck, because you're about to be wrecked. Now, a huge reason why Bungie has presented the Nether Activity to us, in my opinion, is to tee up for what's to come in Frontiers. This is a direction that Bungie wants to take Destiny in. Now, I will say, in terms of formulas for what makes Destiny content appealing, there's never a one formula for everything. Yes, raids are received well, dungeons are received well, but take Onslaught, for instance. Onslaught was received wonderfully well in the Into the Light updates, but in Revenant, there was very much a disinterest in that activity. And it wasn't that Onslaught wasn't a good activity, it's just that it already ran its course. And yes, there were some boss changes, enemy types have also changed, as well as maps, but for me personally, I really just wasn't that crazy about Onslaught 2.0. This Nether Activity, though, is interesting, because now I'm wondering, what if we got an area way bigger than the Dreadnoughts? What if Frontiers is an entire planet or solar system with this same type of formula? What if they take it a step further and include things like Fog of War? And now suddenly we're landing on a planet in a random location and we have to discover the map while also juggling our health as a resource. Guys, this is not entirely a new system. Path of Exile does this literally for everything in maps. Every one of these, outside of towers, brings something unique and different. And this is something that I think Bungie is going to go in the direction of. Imagine loading up into a world that you have to fight through and discover its secrets, juggling your health with different enemy types that, as we know, Bungie's going to lean heavily into with Banes and other modifiers. I can't say I'm not intrigued. And with the Nether Activity essentially being the beta of what's to come, this makes me way more excited for this location versus what we've gotten in the past. And truly ask yourself, other locations inside of Destiny that you've landed in, especially in like the patrol zones, have you ever really felt in danger? The EDZ is not dangerous. Mercury was never dangerous. And I do think that having an area that is dangerous adds to the dopamine high when you successfully navigate through it and unlock its secrets. Something I really like about the Nether Activity is that you're able to get loot throughout the entire activity. You're getting drops from start to end, which pushes you to explore and loot everything you could possibly see. For the first time in years, people are actually caring about what they have on their ghosts. From detector mods to pick up chests and resources nearby, to ghost mods, which actually influence the type of boons that you receive, which will further your build, to even pushing us to potentially use our seasonal armor. Even though all my stat rolls are garbage right now, but yes, they mitigate the damage that you receive in this activity, which, as we know, Armored 3.0 is going to put a big heavy emphasis on us getting those new armor pieces, especially the seasonal armor. If there's one thing to say about Heresy, is that there are ways Bungie is trying to change up the formula. And for a Destiny veteran, I needed this. Now, the other activity that Bungie presented to us is the dungeon. This is the Sundered Doctrine. It is in Rourke's pyramid ship, and dude, the opening lines of this were Savathun's literally addressing us to the final line after beating this dungeon, where she essentially brings up to us that it feels good to be the hero, to be a killer. Dude, it's no denying the fact that Savithic for many is everyone's favorite hive mommy, and for good reason. She's been playing 4D chess since the very beginning, and if there is anyone that I want on her side when going forward to address the next big bad inside of Destiny, that being the Winnower, hands down, we need Savithic. Now, as far as the dungeon itself, I'm a big fan. This might be just one of my favorite dungeons in the game. I think Warlord's Ruin is still my top favorite. It was my #1, but I love the mechanics that they included in this. It's almost like raid style mechanics, but definitely something you could do as a solo player, and it's challenging solo, man. We've been running it back and forth. We've almost gotten it down for the flawless, but from contest mode to doing it normally, this is a challenging dungeon. The good thing is the loot that drops from it are fantastic. That origin traits that we're going to be reviewing here soon is power creep times 10, and the exotic weapon from this dungeon is one of the most exotic weapons Bungie has ever made. The fact that you could shoot this sentry out and then mark where you wanted to shoot, whether it's a specific enemy or a location. When we think of exotic, like the term exotic for a weapon, this is what we think of. This right here. I'm not saying that I didn't enjoy other exotics that Bungie has presented to us, but I would say a few years ago, we kind of saw this mold that Bungie was just trying to fill. They're like, okay, you need an exotic weapon for this dungeon or this activity or that raid. Here you go. It's almost like they would just hit their exotic quota and then call it a day. And then we would have to depend on Sandbox to really amp up those weapons. Whether or not Finality's Augur is the most potent weapon or not, it's the uniqueness, the exoticness of this weapon. And then the fact that it also has an ornament literally called the Flower Game. Hot damn it, fellas. We are being surrounded by riddles. So far, guys, my thoughts on the Heresy for the first week of content. Again, we have so much more going on outside of this. From sandbox changes, the fact that Bungie has literally given us something called Bolt Charge, which for my Titan players out there is one of the most disgusting abilities I've ever seen in the game. Literally watch this right here. I'm two-phasing the second encounter of the dungeon. And it's not because Anarchy is that good or that Riposte here with the stabilizing repulsor brace is the most disgusting auto rifle in the game. No, because it's not. You can honestly do this with Reckless Oracle. What's really happening here is Bolt Charge, which is something that Bungie just added this season, is absolutely the most disgusting subclass keyword Bungie has ever given us. And I personally believe that Bungie saw Destiny Rising and saw Caber's ability and how insane the damage was on that and was like, you know what? We're not gonna let that fly. And they turned around, they gave us Storm's Keep. And the amount of sandbox changes that we have for this episode is insane, fellas. I'm looking at 16 pages of pre and post testing that I'm gonna have to deliver to you guys in the next day. And that's just for the weapons. We're not even talking armor. So there's a lot to do, guys. And I'm not sitting there glazing on Destiny. I'm just saying that this is one of the most densely packed episodes/seasons, especially from a sandbox perspective. I like the Nether Activity. I like the new dungeon. I'm excited to try out the new trials changes this coming week. Is this enough to reverse the decline in Destiny players? Probably not. And that's because majority of the people that I see coming back inside of the streams to check out Destiny, and they all say the same thing. Hey, I quit playing after the final shape. Is there a reason to come back and play Destiny now? The responsibility of Bungie's narrative team going into this next annual expansion is to deliver that reason. And I think narrative plays a big role in this. Final shape for many people was a definitive end, and episodes Revenant and episodes Echoes didn't really provide a good enough reason for players to stick around. Unless you were just heavily invested in Maya Sundered and her story, or perhaps you've got deep love for the Elixir. For the majority of players, those episodes probably didn't resonate. I think Heresy to some degree will resonate a bit more simply because it's about the Dreadnought. Most Destiny players, if not all Destiny players, have played the Taken King. And if they haven't played that, they played the Witch Queen, which is why I do believe there's been some buzz surrounding Heresy. I don't know if Frontiers is going to save Destiny or not. I don't even know what a saved Destiny is supposed to look like. Is it making all-time highs in the Steam charts? Maybe it is. Perhaps that's a consequence of that. But what I will say is that the Steam charts for this past week for the day one numbers for Heresy doesn't aid that argument, at least from my perspective. So far, this has been the best episode delivered amongst the 3 that we have been given. The delivery is good enough that I hope to see this in future seasons. And if this is somewhat of the footprint that Bungie's going to be looking into going into Frontiers, all right, you have my interest, Bungie. Let me know in the comments below what you think. Fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching. And as always,
slap that like button like your mama told you right.